Are you interested in taking the Banner Spear for a spin? Well, in this guide, I won't get into every exhaustive detail. I just want to give you the hits, the highlights, the things that you need to know to get off the ground with this class in Frosthaven. Okay, before we get down to it, let's talk about the elephant in the room. The fact of the matter is that a lot of people who play the Banner Spear don't really like it at the beginning. Some people dislike it so much that they ditch the class entirely. Now, I have a long form video that goes into great detail about this, but for the purposes of this video, I'll say a few short things. I think the key is that the Banner Spear is actually more difficult than it seems to get true value out of. It lists it at a difficulty of 2 on the card, but in truth, its formation attacks, which we'll get into in a second, which are very powerful, are much more difficult to get off than that. And the problem is, if you're in a group of people that don't want to cooperate, that don't want to work together, you're not going to have fun with this class. It's as simple as that. If you're in a group of people that all just want to do their own thing, you're not going to have fun with this class. The thing is, the Banner Spear can't just go out and get their own like other classes can. You're not a blink blade. You can't just go jump around the field and attack everybody and have a great time regardless of what everyone else is doing. In order to get the most out of this class, you need some help, you need communication, you need cooperation. So let's get into what you can do to have fun with this class. There are 2 or 3 different builds that you could go with for this class. There's a tanky build where you're built to absorb damage and take hits for everyone else. There's more of a support build where you're throwing out heals or giving other people effects through your banners, which is where Banner Spear comes from. And then there's a third build, and that's the build that I think you should focus on and throw the other 2 out, to be totally honest. That third build focuses on formation attacks and doing as many of those as possible every round. I think this is the most fun way to play the class. It generates a lot of experience. You're going to do lots of damage. You're going to damage multiple enemies. You're going to do all sorts of fun stuff if you can learn how to do formation attacks appropriately. So let's talk about those formation attacks. A formation attack is essentially a very powerful ability that can do a number of different things. Some formation attacks allow you to attack multiple enemies in a single ability. Some allow you to apply negative status effects. Some let you do things like push or pull enemies after the attack. And all these, and in some cases, they can do multiple of those things with a single attack. They're almost always non-loss. They almost always grant an experience if you can get them off. But there's one key factor that makes them more difficult to get off than regular attacks. You need to have an ally in a certain position in order to get them off at all. This isn't a situation where if your ally's there, it gives you bonuses to the attack. This is a situation that if your ally is not in the location that the card dictates, you can't do the attack at all. So here's an example of the easiest formation attacks you can possibly get off with the Banner Spear. This is combined effort. You look at the top half of this card, here's how you can see how these things are dictated. You see there's a darkened or a black hex, that's where you have to stand. There's a red hex where there has to be an enemy. And then there's a blue hex where there has to be an ally. An ally can be one of the other characters in your party, or it can be a summon or something like that. Anything that would be considered an ally. If you have those 3 things, then what you get to do is you get to attack that enemy in the red hex with an attack 3 and add wound, and you gain an experience, and it's not a loss. Sounds pretty easy, right? Well, this is one of the easy ones. Let's look at one other easy one here. Here's our next easy formation attack, Resolved Courage. In this case, you can see the blue hex is actually behind where the Banner Spear has to be. That's far easier to get someone into that location, whether it's a ranged character in your party, a support character in your party, someone that does not want to get up close and personal. You could also fill it with one of your banners or one of your other summons that are available to you, or someone else's summons. There's a lot of different things that can fill these hexes, and when it has to be behind you, that's much easier to get that position done. And you can see in this case, you can attack up to 3 enemies in red hexes that are in a horseshoe pattern sort of around the front of the Banner Spear. One important note here is that you don't have to have enemies in all the red hexes to perform the attack. You just have to have at least 1 enemy in one of those hexes, or maybe 2 enemies, or maybe all 3, whatever you can pull off. In that case, what you get to do is an attack 3 with Immobilize. Immobilize might not be the sexiest status effect, but it can be beneficial at times for sure. Now let's look at a hard formation attack. This is the kind of formation attack that I generally just didn't bring with me in most cases because I didn't like what I had to do to make it happen. In this case, you can see that there's a blue hex, an enemy, and then you, sort of sandwiched, right? The enemy right between you guys. The problem is that someone has to be on the other side of an enemy, which is often not a situation that you want to be in Frosthaven. Whether that's you, the Banner Spear, or your ally, in a lot of cases, they're not going to go stand behind the enemy because there may be other enemies, further away from him that are now going to target him. Now it's an attack 5, which is nice. That's great to be able to have an attack 5, a non-lost attack 5 with an experience at level 1. But the difficulty of getting this off meant that I just never took it with me. I tried it the very first time and then I ditched it, and I think you should too. Next, here's a look at Rallying Cry. This is also a little more difficult to get off. It's not quite the sandwich that you had for Pincer movement. It's more of a kitty corner situation, but you still have the ally that you need to get this attack off in sort of an awkward position in some cases. The good news is you do an attack 3 with Disarm. Disarm is a very, very powerful effect and something that you want to get off in many cases. And again, like other formation attacks, it's non-loss and it gives you an experience. One other note I want to make about these formation attacks, if you can effectively do them repeatedly throughout the scenario, you can rack up experience with this class, which is always fun. I had moments where I had 17, 18 experience on my dial at the end of a scenario. Maybe not Blink Blade levels, but pretty high experience turnout for this class. Now, before we move on, let's talk about the bottom part of this card, and that's our first Banner summon. Banner is in the name of the class after all. So a banner is a summon that you put out that has no inherent movement, no inherent attack. So it's not like a typical summon that's going to come out and attack enemies for you. This one has 4 health, and what it does do is it provides a status effect or a benefit to anyone who's within a certain range. In this case, any allies that are within range 2 of this banner will get to add +1 to any of their attacks each round, but just one attack, not all of their attacks that round. So that includes summons that are your allies. That includes your Blink Blade friend who might have 3 different attacks and then gets to pick which attack he's going to apply that +1 to. It can be a really nice benefit if you're in an area with a lot of enemies and everyone's bunched close. Or another example is this is a great banner to drop in a boss room, for instance. Now, what I said is banners don't have any inherent movement. That doesn't mean they can't move at all. It just means that they can only move if you or someone else actually grants them movement. Which you do have some cards which allow you to do that. Actually, quite a few cards that allow you to do that. Driving Inspiration here features the other banner that you can bring with you at level 1. This banner is similar. It has 4 health. Again, no movement, no attack, no range, nothing. But the benefit it does provide is that all allies within range 3 get to heal for 1 at the beginning of each of their turns. This can be a really great situational banner if you're going to be in a scenario where you know there's going to be a lot of poison flying around or things of that nature. Other negative status effects like maybe wound, because then you can put out a heal bot that helps everybody for a while. It's not amazing. I didn't bring it very often, but I brought it when I knew I would need it. Let's talk about this card at all costs. The top of this card is pretty cool, but I want to start talking about the bottom. The bottom here is the first example of a non-lost summon. You do have other non-lost summons you can get as you level up with this class, but this is one non-lost summon you have available to right at level 1. You can see that he has 1 health. Yeah, that's right, just 1 health. He has 2 movement, and he has no attack. So he doesn't attack anything. He's not going to, similar to banners, he's not out there to go fight people for you. He also only has 1 health, so he's not going to last very long. But the good thing is that he's non-lost, like we said. And the other important thing to note about this card is that you get to control his movements. Yes, it's only a 2 move, but every time he moves, you get to dictate how he moves, which is very different from most summons. That's great because he's basically a formation bot. If you get him out and can keep him alive, you can move him wherever you need him to be in order to get off different formation attacks every round. The other thing is, like, sometimes maybe you'll get him out and he'll just maybe die right away because he only has that 1 health. But even in that case, it's still somewhat beneficial because he's absorbed an attack that would have otherwise gone to other more important party members. And again, he's non-lost, so you're just going to get him back in your discard pile. You're going to be able to bring him back out again later. And he does also give you an experience. Again, this is where you can see there are a lot of non-lost cards that you can just generate experience over and over again with the Banner Spear. Now quickly, let's also talk about the top action. This is an interesting heal action that they have. In this case, you get to do a heal 3 that affects all allies. There's no range on this card, they just have to be within line of sight. So it's a +3 heal for everybody. But there is some text underneath that you have to pay attention to. For each ally whose hit point value actually goes up due to this ability, the Banner Spear has to suffer 1 damage. So if you perform this and you give out let's say 4 heals, 3 of your other party members plus a summon gets a heal out of this, and all their hit points go up, you have to take 4 damage for that. But you just dealt out 12 healing and you're taking 4 damage. And since you are tanky and you do have more hit points than other classes, it can be useful in a lot of situations. One other great use for this particular top action is if everybody's poisoned. Because if everybody's poisoned, you perform this, everybody's poison goes away, but none of their hit points go up, so you don't take any damage. So it's a free poison eliminator. A very good card to keep with you quite a while at level 1 and on beyond that. So let's talk about 2 more cards and then we'll get to my recommended build for level 1. The first card here is Set for the Charge. This is a very important card. I brought it with me every scenario for a couple of reasons. One, it has a move 4 on the bottom. Move 4 is something you always want to have with you. It also has an initiative of 6, which is great for undercutting many different monster abilities. It can also help you because a lot of times with the Banner Spear, there may be a formation that's sort of ready for you at the beginning of a round, and you want to make sure that you go and get into the right position to pull off that formation attack before anyone else gets the chance to move. So this is a great card for that. That move 4 is also very important because the Banner Spear doesn't have a ton of movement overall. There is one other move 4 that it has available to you that is on one of your other formation attacks, which you will also bring in most cases. But beyond that, it doesn't have any move 3s at level 1. And what it also has are some move 2s, some move 1s with other effects, and some other movements that allow you to have your allies move instead of you. So it's not a great movement class, so you really need to focus and bring those move 4s when you have them available to you. And finally, let's talk about Javelin. Javelin is really important for both the top and the bottom. The top is really useful in those situations where you just don't have a good formation attack available to you. You get to do an attack 3, range 3, and generate wind. Now, honestly, the Banner Spear does not use elements very often, but one element that it does use when it uses it is wind, and it can also be beneficial to your other party members. The other important part about Javelin is the bottom. So it's a move 1. Like I said a minute ago, you have some weird movements. This is just a move 1. After that move 1, you get to do a pull 2, range 3. And this can be really useful to get another enemy into one of your formations, or maybe just get one enemy into your formation. But I use this most often when I had a setup where maybe I had 2 people in a formation. I was trying to pull a 3rd into the right position. This can be really useful for that purpose. Okay, let's talk about how you build the Banner Spear at level 1. First, I'm going to look at the 6 core cards of the class. These are cards that I brought with me throughout my career, almost to every scenario as the Banner Spear. I played the Banner Spear all the way up to level 7 for reference. You can see here most of the formation attacks are those easy types of formations. It's either you have to have an ally beside you or an ally behind you. I didn't bring by default any formation attack that required an ally to be on the other side or myself to be on the other side. You'll also note that you'll see both move 4s are in this collection of 6 cards. Those are always very important, like I said. We also have the Javelin, which we talked about, that gives you that ranged attack if you don't have anything else that you can do. And one last thing I want to note about these, if you look at combined effort here, I didn't talk about the bottom earlier. The bottom of combined effort is a move 2, and then you get to grant 2 allies within range 2 a move 2. Again, those are allies. They're not necessarily your party members, so they can be one of your party members and maybe a banner that you want to keep with you, something to that effect. Like I said before, there are many cards that give you this sort of movement, where you get to move a little and you also get to grant movement to other people. There are other cards that only grant movement to other people. I didn't like those as much, but these ones where you get to move a little and other people get to move a little, those are cards I like to have with me all the time. Now here's a look at what I would recommend for your full 10 card build at level 1. In this case, you get 2 different heals as well. You also get 2 different ranged attacks. You have 2 different banners. You have a little bit of everything that's available to you. Now you can mix and match if you don't like the other 4 cards I added to this. I do recommend keeping the 6 core cards, but you can mix up other things and also change them, obviously, based on what's happening in the scenario. In some cases, there are other cards that are going to be more beneficial based on the layout or the way the scenario plays. Now to wrap up card discussions, we will look at our level 2 level up card options. I'm not going to go through every level, but we'll just do the level 2 ones just to get a sense of what kind of options there are and how I might decide which card I would take. The first card we'll talk about here is Pinning Charge. This is an attack 2, range 3, but if you burn wind, and you do get to generate wind in some cases, if you burn wind, you get to add a range, add immobilize, and add an experience to the attack. So it's generally not an amazing attack all on its own. However, if there are several allies that are adjacent to that target, you get +1 to the attack for each ally. So in some cases, you could turn this into an attack 4, maybe an attack 5 if you're really lucky. But I don't know how often that's actually going to happen. It is a pretty good initiative at 17, which is always nice to have. And then the bottom, you get to grant 3 allies within range 4 or move 2. I talked about this earlier. This is one where you grant other people movement, but not yourself. I don't love these generally. So let's look at the other card. Your other card option at level 2 is Meat Grinder. It's a new formation attack available to you. You'll find as you level up the Banner Spear, you get access to more and more formation attacks, which is usually the card that I would take. In this case, it is a little bit more difficult formation. You kind of have to have an ally on the other side and then you on one side, and then you can hit potentially 2 enemies with this. It's sort of a, overfilled sandwich formation, I guess you might call this. Now, the good thing is you get an attack 4 with wound out of this. So it's a little bit better than some of the other difficult ones to pull off now that it's a level 2 card that we're talking about. It's a 62 initiative, which is nothing to write home about, but on the other hand, it does have a pretty good bottom action as well. You get a move 3, your very first move 3 for this class, if you can believe that. And then after that move, you get to perform a heal 1 within range 1 and also apply regenerate to that target. So you can use that on yourself or you can use that on someone else that you just moved next to in some cases. It's a pretty good card overall. Now, I will admit that when I leveled up to 2, I took Pinning Charge, and that was a horrible, horrible mistake. So please, take Meat Grinder in my opinion. You get another formation attack that you can use. Yes, it's a little bit harder, but it has a good effect and an attack 4, and you also get a pretty good move on the bottom, which is definitely useful. So take Meat Grinder. Let's talk about perks briefly. The first perk I recommend taking is one that removes -1 item effects, and also lets you remove 1 -1 card from your attack modifier deck. Being that you're tanky and you also want to get up into the fray quite often to pull off these formation attacks, you really do want to be able to mitigate damage in some ways. I always carried heavy armor with me. I always usually had a shield. I had multiple ways to try to mitigate damage, so I didn't have to be afraid to get right in there when I wanted to attack multiple enemies or do cool attacks. The other perk that I like early is the one that allows you to, when you open a door, you get to add +3 to your movement. We've already talked about the fact the Banner Spear doesn't have the greatest movement among all the classes. So if you're going to be opening doors, and as a tanky class, you probably are going to be opening doors quite often. You want to get that extra move once you do that, so you can make a decision whether to go straight all the way into the room, whether you need to make the decision to pull out of the room or whatnot based on what you find at the other side of that door. Now beyond that, I always recommend taking the perks that remove -1s or negative cards from your deck. So this first perk at the top where you get to remove -1 and replace it with a rolling shield card, that's a great one. That's another way that you get to mitigate damage. And there's other pretty standard perks that you get to take that will improve your attack modifier deck beyond that. That's all I'll really say about perks for now. Quick note about the 2 masteries available to you. The bottom one, where you basically have to summon a banner, keep it alive the entire time and close to you the entire time, that's a pain in the butt. Now, I think it is doable if you're in a small scenario where it's very limited, maybe 1 room, like some scenarios are. That might be a great time to try to get that mastery. The top mastery is one that I think is more doable because in my build, I'm trying to do formation attacks all the time. And when I'm doing formation attacks, I'm trying to attack as many people as possible. So it's definitely something where I was able to accomplish this one. You probably have to wait until a later level so that you have more formation attacks where you can attack 3 people in 1 attack available to you. I don't think it's even possible at level 1. In fact, I'm pretty sure it's not. Okay, a few more notes here to wrap things up. We talked about picking level up cards, looking at our level 2 cards. For how you pick your other cards, there are a few things I'd recommend. One, I would say I like to focus on the formation attacks. That is just me, but that is kind of the build I'm recommending here. So if you want to dig into those, always really consider heavily the formation attacks that are available to you. But also you want to look at the movement that's available. As I've said before, Banner Spear is a little limited in this department, so any additional movement can be super helpful. And the last thing I would say just about card choice is that just pick what's fun for you in the end. Ultimately, this is a game. You should choose what you want to choose. Don't feel like you have to choose very specific cards every level. You don't. Now, a quick note here about party size, which I do think is important to the success of the Banner Spear. I don't know that I recommend the Banner Spear if you're playing just a 2-player party, at least not in most situations. Now, if you're playing with a Bone Shaper that has a bunch of summons that can help out with positioning, that might make sense, that might be okay. But I think I'd really prefer to play the Banner Spear in larger parties of 3 or maybe 4 players. That will really help give you more opportunities to get those formation attacks off, which is really everything when you're playing this class, in my opinion. The last thing I want to stress with the Banner Spear, communicate, communicate, communicate. That's the only way you're going to get the most out of this character. You really need help of your allies. You need help of the people that you're playing with. Like I said at the beginning, if you're in a party where people don't care and just want to do their own thing, you're not going to have fun with this class. Pick something else, to be totally honest. But if you're in a cooperative party where everyone is working together to push back the forces of Frosthaven, well, Banner Spear can be a great addition to those parties. And I really enjoyed it all the way through. I know that not everybody did, but I believe if you learn how to do these formation attacks and really focus on them, you will get the most out of this class. And lastly, again, just so you know, if you want a really long guide on this, I have a really long guide on this, and I'll link it here again for you. Go over there if you want to sit with me for a whole hour and talk about all the different details of perks and everything else about this class. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.